Some dwarves manage to escape the elven ambush and flee back to their stronghold, where, with a stout palisade in front of them and the mountains at their back, they feel secure. But little do they know that the fire elves have that name for a very good reason. Yes, today on Bane Wars, it's time to unleash the dragons. Hi, I'm Rob Hoyton. Thanks for joining me today on Dragon's Teeth for the latest update in our Bane Wars campaign. So we're getting into moves 10, 11, 12, and things are really hotting up between the fire elves and the dwarves. You may remember from last time that the fire elves discovered a dwarven mining operation in a range of mountains near the heart of the Bane. They moved in to investigate. Their friendly overtures were dismissed out of hand, so they ambushed a group of dwarves on the way in to the stronghold and kind of laid siege to it. Now, the stronghold, if you imagine a narrow pass into the mountains, the road leads into that pass, but it is protected by a log palisade across the front with a gate in the middle, couple of towers. So the fire elves' next decision was to destroy that palisade in order to get into the mountain pass beyond and basically see what's happening with this mining operation. Or, well, I think really they just want to take it over. Of course, the dwarves have other ideas. That's where we were at the end of the previous turn. The fire elf commander then came up with a plan to assault the palisade. And the way he did this was, of course, to involve the fire elves' secret weapon, or not so secret, they have a pair of dragons. But the plan was a little more nuanced than just sending the dragons in. First of all, the light cavalry were going to go in under covering fire from archers. They were going to spread brushwood and the like at the foot of the palisades, maybe throw some oil in there. Then it was going to be fire arrows in to get that burning nicely. However, the dwarves, of course, having ready access to water, because there's a large stream that comes down through the mountain, had already soaked the logs. You know, they know what they're about, these dwarves. So that fire didn't manage to catch hold. However, of course, once the dragons got involved and also the mage came up and chucks a couple of fireballs in, well, nothing's going to withstand that. There was a nice conflagration blazing away merrily. The dwarves were forced to retreat and the way to the mountain pass seemed open. But when the fire elves investigated, once all the smoke and everything had cleared, they got into the mountain pass to discover that those sneaky dwarves, being very good with stone, of course, had built a sort of rock wall across the inside of the pass. And more than that, that stream I mentioned earlier, they're diverted and dammed to create a flooded area in front of the rock wall. No one knows how deep that is. It could be ankle deep, it could be neck high, you know. And if you're wearing any sort of armor, let alone chainmail, you don't want to be wading waist high in water while dwarves are taking pot shots at you with crossbows from above. All of which leads us on to today's battle. Because, of course, the fire elves now, they've got the bit between their teeth. They've still got a couple of dragons. They've not really taken any casualties yet. They want to press on now. They're determined to drive the assault home. They're determined to at least get in and investigate this mining operation. So that's the setup for today's battle. Now, before we get into that, there's just something else I wanted to talk about as well, because I was having a chat with Matt, one of the players down at Bedford Gladiators the other week, and he said he was talking to a friend who said, "Oh, you're in that campaign, aren't you? How's it going?" And he said, "Yeah, we're up to move 10 now." And his friend said, "Wow, you must have had loads of battles." And Matt said, "Well, no, not really." And apparently his friend says, 10 moves and no battles. That sounds a bit boring. In my campaign, we have a battle every week. So this was interesting because I thought this was one of those areas where terminology changes over time. So me, I've seen this most in music. When I were a lad, garage music meant something different to what it does today. Garage music to me back then was that sort of 60s punk stuff, the Seeds, Question Mark and the Mysterians, the fuzz tones, all that sort of thing. Nowadays, of course, garage means something else entirely different. I guess like it's like a type of house music, I suppose you call it, something like that. So terminology changes. Now, to my mind, what that person was describing was like a league or a competition. And this seems quite a common thing these days. There was one running at the club not that long ago. I think it was using never mind the bill hooks. So every player makes an army. They're given 1,000 points or whatever. There's a table drawn up. Everyone plays everyone else. You might get points for winning, points for losing, and there's like a league table builds up. So that is what now some people consider a campaign. Or it could be like a competition like you see at war game shows, in which case, two players fight and a winner goes on to fight the next winner. So like a kind of knockout thing, there's going to be one winner at the top at the end of it. That's all great. That's all fine, all good fun, all enjoyable stuff. But to my mind, a campaign is something that is built more around a narrative. That could be something quite straightforward. I mean, let's take an example that's very topical at the moment, of course. You might have a campaign where your forces have to land on the shore, so a seaborne landing. Now, this can be any era or any genre. So your first battle is getting your forces ashore. Second battle might be an objective 10 miles inland. Third battle might be something else. Fourth battle, you might be at the capital of the nation you're attacking, and so on. So there you could have 3 or 4 battles linked together by a narrative. Now, that doesn't have to be particularly involved, but what it would mean is your casualties from one battle aren't there for the next battle. Of course, you may have reinforcements coming in, likewise for the defender as well. So, in other words, what happens in the first battle will directly affect the outcome of what happens in all the subsequent battles. Now, that's a very simple narrative. You're just keeping track of casualties and reinforcements. Of course, campaigns can develop way beyond that, all the way up to the sort of Tony Bath idea, the Hyboria campaign, which ran for years and had I don't know how many players. It spawned its own newsletter, books, there were articles on it. It went into detail on the ruling families of each nation and all that sort of stuff. Lots of intrigue, supplies, crops, very, very detailed stuff. Bane Wars to me is somewhere between those two things. We're keeping things fairly straightforward. It's in quite a confined area. We've got 5 armies, and the main aim at this stage is exploration of this strange area, finding different things as you go through, artifacts, history, lore, maybe an idea about what happened here. And of course, during that exploration, you're going to bump into other armies. So while we haven't had a major clash between 2 armies at the moment, there have been times when it's got close. It's interesting when you see the whole map overall, you see 2 armies go like this and you think, oh, there's going to be a fight next week. And then they do that, you know. Uh, so no major confrontations at the moment, though I think there's 1 or 2 coming. They're on the way, they're getting close. What there has been is all that exploration, finding out different things. There's been a fair amount of espionage going on, spying, scouting, gathering information. There's also been contact with at least 2 non-player character armies as well. So there's potential there for further either conflict or, of course, for some sort of alliance. Everyone has different motivations, everyone has different aims and goals. Some may coincide, some not. So that for me is a campaign setting, very narrative driven, with all these possibilities of alliances, backstabbing, intrigue, and all the rest of it before you even get onto the tabletop, onto the battlefield to start fighting those major battles. Anyway, I thought that's something I just mentioned because I think it's interesting how terminology changes and how sometimes when you set something up, you have this idea in mind, and I'm going to call it that. To another person or other people, they might think you're talking about something totally different. So let's get back to the elves and the dwarves And let's see how the Fire Elves' new plan, their very cunning plan, works out. And here's our fantastic battles rule set that we're using as our set of rules for our 10 mil battles during this campaign. I'm using these today, but I'm not using them kind of in the normal way because I'm working with 25 mil figures, so they're not based up to the right scale. Also, this is more of a skirmish than a large scale battle, so I'm using things like the resolve points and the missile rules, that kind of thing. But I'm going to be making some adjustments as I go along. So here's our table set up. The elves have broken through the palisade into the opening of the pass beyond. Bit of a surprise waiting for them. The dwarves have not only built a stone wall across the pass, they've also dammed a stream that was running through and made this large pool of water in front of the wall. Who knows how deep that is. To each side we've got the cliffs and the mountains. That's a representation, of course. I couldn't get full-scale cliffs and mountains. And as you can see, we have our forces ready. The dwarvish defenders are all infantry. They've got some crossbow units in there as well. There's the commander with his banner. And also up on the cliffs they've got some crossbow units. Now these are concealed. The elves don't know they're there to start with. They're tucked away up on the mountainside. Also hidden and tucked away at the back, we have a group of cave trolls. They're in alliance with the dwarves for particular reasons that I won't go into at the moment because that's all part of the campaign lore. But yeah, the dwarves have got a reasonably strong position there. The elves don't know how deep that water is, and obviously their attack is going to be funneled into the waiting dwarves. Here's the attacking elf units. We've got some light cavalry with some heavy cavalry in reserve. And we've got some dismounted cavalry as well. The archers are actually a cavalry unit, but they're on foot. We've got some light infantry. We've got the commander and the mage there with their own banner. We've got some heavy infantry units as well. And we've also got a surprise weapon that I think is going to be making an appearance pretty quickly. And that secret weapon is a pair of dragons, represented by one dragon here because, well, this is one of my old D&D models, and in D&D it was rare you came up against two dragons, so I've only ever bought one. But yeah, a pair of dragons backing up this force who are in the pass and ready to put their plan into action. And as I mentioned at the start there, I'm using 25mm figures for these, and in fact these are some very old figures. A lot of these are from the Minifigs Middle-earth range, which dates back to the 70s, I think. Certainly these were some of the first wargaming figures I ever used. So yeah, they're getting on for 50, 60 years old. Now Steve is the player who's commanding the Fire Elf army here, and he always gives very detailed and very interesting orders. So I thought I'd read his orders out, his plan out here, then you can see what the elves have in mind. Force A will make scaling ladders and battering rams from the local trees in preparation to assault the dwarves. Once ready, on a morning with no wind or a light breeze from the south, just before dawn is breaking, 2 companies of dismounted light cavalry archers and the 2 remaining companies of heavy infantry will approach the wall. The other 2 companies of dismounted light cavalry will follow behind. They will stop out of range and will wait for the 2 dragons to swoop in as dawn breaks. Very dramatic. The dragons will land south of the stream and using fire breath will create a mist steam screen from the stream water in front of the wall, blowing towards the wall and fire breathing at the top of the wall. Once a mist screen is created, the archers will then approach and be ready to shoot over the dragons in support of the infantry. The infantry with scaling ladders will then approach, led by Lord Tyrion, and assault the walls. The archmage will arrive and lead the dragons flying over the walls to attack any defenders from the rear and above, and attack any units arriving in support. The other 3 companies of dismounted light cavalry will pass through their comrades, and 2 units will scale the wall to support the infantry crossing the wall and support them on the other side. The third company will use battering rams and wooden poles to lever gaps in the wall. Once gaps are made, the rest of the dismounted light cavalry will all pass through the wall. The 2 heavy cavalry units will then pass through the gaps in the wall to press the attack. So there we are, quite a plan, I'm sure you'll agree, very detailed, and a good plan, I think, a cunning plan. Let's see how it plays out. And so it begins, turn 1. As dawn breaks, a pair of dragons come swooping into the pass and hover over the body of water in front of the makeshift defences. Now, the dwarves know that the dragons are around, they've seen them before, so they're not totally surprised, and they are going to get a chance to get some crossbow bolts off before the dragons do anything. I'm going to count this as 2 companies of crossbows behind the wall there, opening fire as the dragons come in. So they'll get a bonus because of the size of the dragons, but I'm also going to give them a minus because the dragons are coming in low and fast, and we've also got that rising sun coming up as well that might just dazzle dwarven eyes a little bit. So we're going to make 2 dice rolls, 1 for each company, 1 on each dragon. There's our first company and our second. So we've got 1 hit on the larger dragon, the older one, and we've got 2 hits on the younger dragon. But given the resolve of these dragons, that's not really going to bother them much. It's certainly not going to stop them at the moment. And now the dragons get their turn. They unleash fiery breath upon the waters, and the plan works. The waters start to boil and raise a huge cloud of steam that flows up and over the wall. So this is seriously going to impede the defenders. It's difficult to see, difficult to shoot through. In fact, it's going to be difficult for them even to stand there because, well, can you imagine standing there in chainmail, getting slowly steamed? The plan then is starting to work, and it's round 1 to the elves. And in fact, this actually forces any dwarves on top of the wall to move back now. Not only do they run the risk of getting scalded, but of course they don't want to draw the attention of either of the dragons. This effectively nullifies all the crossbow fire from the defenders behind the wall. They can't see over the wall, they can't shoot, and it gives the dragons free rein really in this whole area in front here. And yeah, this means that the elf infantry can move forward as well. So we've got the dismounted cavalry archers coming up into position, and the heavy infantry will be following to get ready for the assault. Now, the elf bowmen are obviously in range of the wall, but that steam works both ways. Can't see in, can't see out. So they've not really got anything to fire at the moment, but nonetheless they're in position should any dwarven heads start popping up again above the parapet. The heavy infantry have scaling ladders, remember. So as I said, they're going in for the assault. And then there's light infantry behind. Oh, there's the commander, Tyrion. The light infantry are coming in behind, and their job is to dismantle the wall to try and make a physical breach through it. So the dragons, of course, are totally unaffected by steam. I suspect it's like a little bit of a nice steam bath for them. They now start to hover along the wall, breathing fire on anything that appears, which is still pretty much nothing. However, remember those crossbow dwarves up high on the cliffs and the mountains? They now appear, and they've got a clear shot down onto the dragons. So they're going to open fire. Again, they're getting the bonus for the large size of the dragons. No other real modifiers there. They're way above the steam, it can't affect them there. I'm going to roll some dice for those crossbows. And we do get some hits on the dragon. It does take a few wounds. Now, as I said, this is the smaller, younger dragon. This is actually its first battle. It doesn't like coming under fire from heavy crossbows, so it's going to retreat. Yes, back to the mage. If in doubt, return to mummy. And that's going to need someone to tend its wounds. Now that's a little bit of a knock for the elves. However, it does have an effect on the other dragon. He becomes enraged at this attack on his friend. So he's taking off, shooting straight up in the air to hover above those crossbow dwarves on the side of the mountain there. And he's going to give them a good spray, or several sprays actually. Now, they've not got much chance. They're really exposed. They've got no cover on the mountainside there. They're just going to have to try and take it. So the next thing is to roll some dice to see how many, if any at all of them, survive the wrath of the dragon. So Dragon's Breath counts as a barrage in the rules. I'm going to give the dragon 3 attacks here because he's coming up and he's going to get a few sprays in. And I think he's on a 3+ to hit. And as I say, those poor dwarves are really exposed, so it's not looking good for them. And it's 3 hits. Ouch. Now, given the time that the dragon takes to get up there, I'm going to allow the dwarves to get some return fire in. But they are going to be on a minus, because let's face it, as doughty as dwarves are, standing and firing at a dragon that's hurling fire at you at speed, you know, that takes a little bit of doing. But we'll give them a dice roll as well, and they don't actually get any hits. So no big surprise there. Yeah, that's it for those dwarves. They're toast, quite literally. I did say to Steve when I read his orders, do you like your dwarves fried or boiled? Well, looks like he's got both. And having dealt with that threat, our dragon is now free to return to its original mission. So now it's going behind the wall, it's flying above, maybe keeping out of crossbow range at the moment, but just really flying top cover and looking for targets of opportunity. Meanwhile, the rest of the elf forces are moving up. We've got the archers coming up to cover the walls. Really, again, just looking to keep dwarven heads down. The steam has dissipated now, so there could be the chance of some crossbow fire from the defenders. And Lord Tyrion now starts moving up with the heavy infantry. They're bringing up the ladders for the first direct assault on the wall. We're going to have the elven archmage moving up as well. I think originally the plan was for him or her to use the dragon, but of course the dragon is wounded. So the archmage is going to move up with the troops to provide any magical support. Now the steam has cleared now largely, so the dwarves are going to move back onto the wall just in time to meet those attackers. So we're going to get our first serious melee in this middle section here. Sadly for the dwarves, of course, they're moving forward to the wall. Does bring them back under the shadow of the dragon, which can quite easily swoop down and spray behind the wall there. So there's the potential for some dwarfish casualties before they get into melee. However, there are some crossbow troops down there, so it could be that the dragon isn't going to have it all his own way. Let's roll some dice for the dragon attack then. Nice high score, and the dwarven crossbows get to respond. And they roll a double 1. Oh dear, not very good at all. Not really surprising if you're under fire from a dragon, I suppose. Does put off your aim a bit. So that means we're going to remove that company of crossbow dwarves on the left flank. Not only is the dragon unscathed then, but that leaves a nice big gap on that flank there. So the heavy infantry are going to switch to that side now. They've got their ladders ready, they're scaling the wall. I'm going to put the figures just on the other side of the wall because they won't balance on the edge there. But yeah, they've made it across. They've got no opposition to their crossing. Lord Tyrion leads the charge, of course. And yeah, we can safely say that the elves have breached the wall. And at the same time, the heavy infantry on the elves' right flank are also scaling the wall. But they're coming up against opposition because the dwarves are back manning the wall now. So we've got a melee there. The mage has moved up for support. Probably going to cast a bless spell or something similar on that unit. And we've got the light infantry in the middle advancing on the wall with their sticks and levers ready. And of course we've got the elf archers as well in support. I suppose they could do indirect fire over the wall. Probably not going to do any real damage though. And at the back we've got the cavalry patiently waiting for that breach. And there's units of heavy cavalry as well, just off table down the road there. The defenders charge up to meet those elves on the left flank. That gives us 2 melees going on now, so we need to get some dice rolls going. Normally we'd be using resolve counters to keep track of casualties, but due to the scale of this, I'm just going on dice rolls. I'm adding in the usual modifiers from the melee table, but really it's just on comparative dice rolls, and I'll actually be removing figures. And the elves come out on top in this particular case. They lose 1 figure and the dwarves lose 3. But after all, these are heavy elf infantry, an elite unit, and the dwarves are just regular troops really, out on this godforsaken mining post in the middle of nowhere. Not a great posting. Even less so when dragons start attacking you. And despite the mage's bless spell, the elves on the right fare worse. The dwarves are making a stout defence there. The elves lose 2 figures and the dwarves lose 1. And those infantry in the middle are now moving up to the wall, so they'll start rolling next turn to see if they demolish the wall. What we basically do is give any structure resolve points and kind of roll for an attack in the normal way. Once the resolve points are gone, the wall is destroyed. And our dragon is still on top cover, of course. Not many targets to really go for because all those units are in melee, so there's no chance of attacking there. However, there is that group of trolls lurking round. Now, they are tucked away a little bit in the cliff side, under the cover of the cliff. So we're going to roll a dice to see if the dragon can spot them. 4, 5, 6, he can. And he does. So the dragon spots the trolls, so he can come in to attack those. The dragon gets an okay roll, and the trolls are pretty tough, so we're going to say 1 figure removed. However, the effect this does have is to force the trolls to go back deeper under cover. Back to our melee then, and our fight on the left. Both sides roll high. In the fact, the dwarves roll particularly high, so the elves are going to take some more casualties. However, the dwarves are going to lose a significant amount of their figures here. Really, it only leaves them a couple of figures. They've got the commander there and the standard bearer, but that's pretty much it. And our friend here with the horn, I suspect he's blowing that for all he's worth, trying to summon reinforcements. Meanwhile, the defenders on the other flank get a terrible dice roll. That allows the elves to break across. They're over the wall. It's breached on both flanks now. And now the wall is clear. That allows the mage and the archers to move up on top of the wall. Again, I'm just putting these figures over the other side of it. And from the top of the wall, the archers have a nice view of the battle. Any troops that aren't in melee, they can fire at. The trolls are undercover, out of way. The dragon is keeping those out of action at the moment. So the archers don't really have too much to fire at. And of course we've got those light infantry as well. Oh, we need to roll a dice for those to see if they break the wall down yet, or how much damage they do. And they roll 2 1s. Not much. And I'm going to make a slight adjustment to Steve's plan here. Because we have that breach on the wall on the left, those light infantry are not going to wait, but they're going to come charging straight over the wall in support of their heavy infantry comrades ahead. I figure if they see the opportunity, they're going to take it. So there's no real shooting going on for next round. The mage casts another bless spell on the unit, and we continue our melee. And the heavy infantry elves go first. They get a good score. The dwarves also get quite a reasonable score. So given that the elves are outnumbered there, we're going to remove 2 figures from each side. And back on the left flank, the elves score very well, so they decimate that dwarven unit. All that's left is the commander, his little command team. So we're going to roll a dice to see if he survives. He needs a low to do so. He scores a 2. So we're going to allow the commander and his team to escape. Takes his banner man with him. And of course, not forgetting his trusty hornblower. Now for the dwarves over on this side, of course, seeing their commander flee is going to have a bad effect on morale. Added to which, we still have the dragon floating overhead, also not good for morale. So I'm going to give them a dice roll to see what happens, and they need a low score to stay, as doughty as they are, and they roll a 5. So this dwarf unit is decidedly wavering now. But having said that, dwarves are sturdy folk and they are fighting in their natural environment. So I'm going to allow them to make a fight in retreat. They're going to fall back in good order. They're going to form a line. They still have the trolls behind them backing them up as well. The demolition team in the middle get a better dice roll this time, so we're going to say that wall is halfway destroyed now. And the dwarves retreating, of course, does create some space and opens them up to missile fire, so we've got an exchange between the elvish bowmen, and there's still a couple of crossbows in that dwarf unit, but it's light casualties. However, as the trolls come out to support that unit, that means the dragon can come in to have another opportunity to attack them, and another troll is gone. And we'll take this one at the front, this nice one. It looks like he's sort of been well done anyway, doesn't he? Well roasted. So the elves have no real opposition now. They're able to move forward to gang up on that surviving unit. So the heavy infantry are coming up on the road. The heavy infantry on the right are charging in, and they're going to be backed up by the archers. So things looking pretty poor for the dwarves now, and of course we've got the other unit of archers, and all the other infantry are coming over the wall now. The cavalry just waiting for that gap to appear. Speaking of which, let's see how the demolition team are doing. They get another dice roll now. And there we go, a 5 and a 6. So we can say that that wall is destroyed. There we go, the way is now open. Those light infantry can come forward, and the light and heavy cavalry will be following in. Rolling the dice again for that last melee now. And both sides do okay actually. So we're going to take off 3 dwarves because they are outnumbered, and we'll take off 2 of the elf archers because they're the lighter troops, the less well armoured. The trolls lose another figure to dragonfire, so they figure the safest place to be is in melee. They're going to charge ahead into the elves there. Now also because of the situation, the mountains are these trolls' home. This is where they live, so they're defending their home. They're very well motivated. I don't want to go too much further into that because it's part of the narrative and lore of the campaign. But nonetheless, they're really giving it all or nothing now. It's their last-ditch attempt to defend their home. So we've got the elf cavalry moving up into the breach. We've got that one dwarf unit there which is pretty much surrounded. And we've got the trolls defending the road. Our dwarf commander and his entourage have disappeared. Can't see them for dust. It's looking pretty hopeless for these surviving dwarves, so we've got the mage there. The elves are going to offer surrender terms, and we'll make a roll for that in a moment to see if the dwarves accept. That really just leaves this final battle then between the trolls and the heavy infantry. Now the trolls are tough, but so are the heavy infantry, and of course they've got their hero Lord Tyrion taking part as well. We're going to say that the dwarves need to roll low in order to keep on fighting. A 6. Well, that's pretty decisive, isn't it? The dwarves accept defeat. They accept the terms of surrender. They lay down their crossbows and axes. And there we go. There's the prisoners being guarded by the elf archers. We've got the cavalry have come up through the breach now. And there's just those trolls to deal with, of course, but the dragon is now there on the road. They can basically be surrounded and dealt with. We'll draw a discreet veil over that, I think. But the elf forces are basically victorious. They've broken into the mountain range now. Who knows what lays ahead. But for the moment they can celebrate as the elven standard is raised aloft over the mountains. Lots of celebration then. But hark! Wait! What's that sound? Could it be away to the south? Yes, it's the sound of a dwarven horn. What can this mean? There we go then. Victory for the elves again. That's 2 wins in a row against the dwarves. And the elves are on their way into the mountain complex. However, there was that warning sound from the south. Could it be there's another dwarven army approaching, perhaps? Could be reinforcements. Could be a relief force. Could just be one dwarf on a cart blowing a big horn. Stay tuned to find out. And as I said earlier, all those other armies now, things are getting quite close. Armies are finding their objectives or finding other people's objectives as well. So the stage is set not only for some conflict, but perhaps for some wheeler dealing around all the various artifacts and bits and pieces that are being discovered. As always, please do keep all your comments, questions, and suggestions coming in. Thanks to everyone who subscribed so far, by the way. We've had some more new subscribers this month. Thanks very much. It's greatly appreciated. If you haven't already, do us a favor, click the subscribe button, click the like button below, and help the channel grow. All right, that's it from the battlefield. I'll see you next time.